Christians need to stop listening to the world and start listening to God, so that thinking Christian becomes as natural as breathing. Welcome to the Thinking Christian podcast. This is Dr. James Spencer. Through calm, thoughtful, theological conversations, Thinking Christian offers a mix of interviews and discussions that highlight the ways God is working in the lives of His people and question the underlying social, cultural, and political assumptions that keep the church from conforming more closely to the image of Christ. Doing something that you're ultimately is going to drain you of energy. I think resolutions should actually push you forward. They shouldn't be holding you back and dragging you down. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Thinking Christian. Today, we are going to be discussing New Year's resolutions. We're coming up on New Year. New Year's resolutions are a big part of that. And so we thought we'd have a conversation about how to set New Year's resolutions. Maybe it'll work. And then also provide you with some opportunities that would be spiritually enriching as New Year's resolutions. So,
James,
how's it going, Richard?
It's good. Good. I was just going to tell you, you know the history of New Year's resolutions, right?
I do not. What do you got?
It came from the Babylonians. Did you? I'm just reading this now. Historically, the first recorded people to set New Year pledges, later to become known as resolutions. I kind of like pledges too. I think those are cool. Are the ancient Babylonians some 4,000 years ago. So they've been doing that, and you know how that's really worked well for Babylon. I know. So.
Yeah.
It's this that whole self-reliance thing.
They should have made better resolutions.
That's right. Yeah, they could have too, and I think that's what we're going to talk about today too, making better resolutions, right?
Yeah, I'll admit I don't usually do a New Year's resolution.
I don't either.
I usually just sort of decide at some point when I'm going to start doing something and when I'm not, and then I do it then.
It's really interesting because I know that as a CEO and executive director that I have to set objectives for my organization. Yeah. And I always think of that as almost resolutions in that way, because you're saying, hey, this is what we're going to do this year. Yeah. And that's if I guess if you have that kind of mentality, resolutions could probably be pretty good, especially when you're accountable to others. Like you and I are both accountable to a board, right? So,
yeah, and I think there's a sense in which the New Year's could be a good place to start. Now, I will say this: I find the New Year's to be difficult to start something for a number of reasons, me personally. And so usually when I think of my New Year's resolutions, I'm thinking around like January 10th, January 15th, if I'm going to actually start something. Right. Because, that time period between Christmas and New Year's is so busy. Like I just tend to have other things that aren't normal things, right? You've got a New Year's party here. You've got, whatever it is you're doing, so yeah, if you're doing some sort of fitness or nutrition based goal, sometimes that can be problematic. So, I guess the first thing I would say to folks when they're thinking about their New Year's resolutions is don't get stuck on New Year's. Right. If you're thinking, hey, I got to start January 1st after you've just had, even if you just stayed up with your kids to watch the ball drop, right? I would tell you that me at 45, staying up past midnight anymore, I'm kind of wrecked the next day. Like, I need my 10 o'clock bedtime if I'm going to be functioning the next day. And so you're kind of setting yourself up for failure if you're deciding that no, January 1st has to be the thing. If it's going to be a New Year's resolution, it's got to be there. And what I would say is no, like prepare to resolve, right? Like put yourself in a situation where the resolution is actually going to be possible. Right. And so I wouldn't worry too much, even though you might call it a New Year's resolution. I wouldn't worry too much about the January 1st start date. That may or may not be a great time for you to do, your resolution at that first time. I just know, again, from my time as personal trainer, right? January 1st generally was not a great day for people to work out. The people I was working out often had a really good time the night before.
Hmm.
And so they'd come in and their workouts were not enjoyable for them. They were, and it wasn't like I was trying to, hurt anybody, but they were not feeling physically well. And so when they'd come in to work out, everything that is sort of torturous in the gym, depending on who you ask, right? um,
Right.
they're feeling that torture that much more. And
Hmm.
so I just think that as people look at their New Year's resolutions, backing them out and saying, what's realistic for me to start this? Do I want to start it? Like I said, if I was going to do and I do have some goals for next year, but I'm looking at them more like end of January, right?
Right. Right.
My kids have a lacrosse tournament out in California mid January, and so it's like, well, that's going to be a real hiccup. But after
Hmm.
that, I don't have much planned that is going to, create problems, and so
Right.
I'll just hold it off until after that, come back, and then I'll hit it hard. That's the kind of thing that I think we need to be thinking through or that at least my first tip for people who are making resolutions.
Right. Right. Yeah, I think that's good. I think you invented gradual resolutions. I think that's good. Uh, I'll
New
gradually get to it.
it's New Year's ish. New Year's ish
New Year's.
resolutions.
That's right.
That's right.
It
New
is.
Year's ish.
It is in the new year,
Yeah.
and even though you're going
All
to
of
get
us.
some of those things done within, what about quarterly resolutions, like you do objectives? You say, boy, I've got 13 weeks to work with. I can start this from day one. I can do this week two and go on to
Yep.
13. Those are kind of nice, and you know, it really keeps things new
It
when you
does.
when you do things that way. And
Yeah,
I
I think if
I, I tend to like that method.
I do too. I think the one caveat I put on it is to say if you're going to do those sort of quarterly type goals or add something new every week, I think what you have to be prepared for is, the week before needs to be successful before you add in, something else the second week.
Absolutely right.
And so, again, I'll sort of liken it to weight training, right? It'd be awesome to add weight to the bar every time I went to the gym, right?
It's not going to
But
happen.
right, the reality is if I try to bench, 350 pounds or something like that one week and don't get it, I shouldn't
Hmm.
add 355 the next.
Right.
Right. There's a very low likelihood that I'm getting that after I've just missed 350. And so you have to calibrate those on where you are and what your success level's been.
Right.
And so, as you're trying to build toward, a greater and greater goal achievement,
Hmm.
right? Moving toward your resolution. My advice to people is pick something that is the bare minimum that you can do.
Right.
Right. So what I would say is something like I did this with my prayer time. I have not been a very good prayer time person. I'm an academic geek. I'll sit and read for hours. Like it's no problem for me. I love doing it.
Hmm.
But prayer just felt like it was distracting me from my reading. And so, you know, I took what I did was I said, no, it's probably not, that's not the right way to frame prayer at all. And so what I started doing was I started reading prayers.
Good.
So lean into my strengths, right? So I'd read
Hmm.
one prayer. I got a book of prayers and I'd read one prayer before I started studying.
Hmm.
And then pretty soon, a couple weeks after that, stayed pretty consistent. Then I started writing out my own prayers. I could
Right.
actually sit down again. I'm a reader and a writer, and so it made intuitive sense for me to sort of craft the prayers that I was actually praying. There was something about writing them down that made them more concrete. It kept
Yeah.
my mind more focused, gave me time to really think it through. And then eventually I sort of progressed beyond both of those and started, reading my own prayers and then, saying my own prayers. But it wasn't a very long time. I would say even now, I don't take any more than, 10 minutes of prayer a day. I just it for me, that's a really hard buildup.
Yeah.
And I don't, I really appreciate people who can do it for an hour or something like that.
Hmm.
That is in no way, shape, or form where I'm at. And so for me to think though that I'm going to go from 0 to an hour is crazy town,
Right.
right? I needed that progression. And so I think as we look at it from that sort of progressive standpoint, that would be sort of my second tip for people is start with the minimum, lean into your
Hmm.
strengths and start with a minimum,
Right.
right? Do something you're actually going to do, right?
Hmm.
Don't, again, to go back to exercise, don't program, if you haven't been working out, trust me, don't program 7 days a week workouts. I've
Hmm.
been working out since I was 14 years old. It's difficult for me to get 7 days in. I
Right.
usually do 4 or 5,
Hmm.
right? And that's pretty good for me. But even then, my workouts aren't that long, especially not anymore. I mean, I do maybe 40, 45 minutes, and that's it.
Right.
And so I think, there has to be that calibration of where you are, where you want to be, and all the small incremental steps that you need to get there.
Well, and I think you hit on one thing as far as incorporating prayer into something that you enjoy doing as
That's
well.
right.
You were talking about prayer. Um, you're about to initiate the 30 days of the gospel.
Yeah.
Incorporating prayer into that reading
Yeah.
is certainly when you pray the gospels, that can be really powerful.
Yeah, it can be. And I think that's a really sort of, as we go through those 30 days, that'll be part of what we're doing. And
Yeah.
so the goal of 30 days in the gospel is really put some of these principles into practice, right?
Hmm.
I think, most people, at least I've talked to, they do read
Hmm.
their Bibles during the day at some point.
Right.
But yeah, I talked to about I don't know, 4 or 5 people at my church, and they all said the same thing, which isn't a real big focus group, but it is what it is. They
Right.
they said they'll read their Bibles, but it doesn't feel particularly systematic. It doesn't feel like they're building anywhere,
Hmm.
right? They're reading sort of varied passages, or they're doing a devotional that kind of hops around, and so it's good, but they don't really get like sort of a sequenced narrative of the scriptures. And
Right.
so the 30 days in the Gospel is really intended to do that. It's intended to say, okay, we're not going to cover every passage in the Gospels. You're going to read every passage,
Hmm.
but we're not going to cover every passage. But what we're going to try to do is give you the overarching understanding of each of those four Gospels as we go. And then the plan is
Yes.
actually after that to go into the book of Acts. Just seems like a
Okay.
natural
Right.
move
Of course.
to move into the book of Acts.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think incorporating prayer into that is going to be an important aspect of what we do,
Hmm.
and trying to make sure that we not only sort of learn head knowledge, right? But I mean, the distinction I usually make is when Jesus tells his disciples, "Go ye therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them and teaching them to observe all I've commanded you."
Hmm.
Well, there's a difference between those people learning to observe Jesus and just learning about Jesus.
Right.
And so we're going to try to push to be hearers and doers of God's word, because I think knowing God's word comes from the doing as much as it comes from the reading. And
Yes.
so that'll be in the mix as well. So all of
Hmm.
it should be pretty reinforcing. But yeah, definitely, I think it's going to be designed to, number one, give people a fairly easy way to do it. It's going to be a podcast. And so, 30 minutes a day, while you're driving, whatever it is you're doing. And
Hmm.
then number two, it does set some sort of incremental level,
Right.
right? That it's fairly simple. If you can devote this much time during your day to sort of reading or listening, it's actually just 4 chapters a day max to read through the Gospels in 30 days.
Hmm.
And so that's not that long.
No,
Yeah,
it's not. And as I said, sometimes incorporating your gifts and talents, if you are a writer and
yeah,
you want to interpret something, uh,
that's right.
and go ahead and do that. While that's like active prayer.
Sure.
Um, as a songwriter, I try to do the same thing. I try to think, boy, what was the phrase? What was the repeat? What's the verse? What's the chorus? What's the bridge here?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
and it's really kind of it actually makes songwriting even more fun that way too.
yeah,
But and it becomes a prayer.
I'm sure. Yeah, I think, a lot of these little tips, I think they relate to things outside of resolutions, right?
Yes,
So,
right.
writing, for instance, I've been doing a lot more writing lately. And so I've sort of made the commitment that I'm going to spend at least 15 minutes writing a day.
Hmm.
And it doesn't really matter. I'll just sit down and type. I'll type out ideas, I'll type out themes that I want to cover, I'll type out, ideas, maybe do a paragraph or two, whatever, and I just keep them and then kind of sock them away different places. But it keeps me in the rhythm of writing.
Right.
And it does give me an outlet just to think about things and to synthesize what I've been reading or synthesize what I've been looking at. And so, yeah, playing to your strengths like that. And again, it won't be writing for everybody, right? Some people,
Right.
they need just time to decompress. They need a quiet place where they're doing nothing, right? And I think that's great too. But that's definitely not me. But my wife and I are very different in this respect, right? If I need a break from doing what I usually do during the day, I'll hit the gym.
Mm-hmm.
That is not her go-to at all, right? She's much more the quiet space, quiet time, like please nobody bother me kind of, person.
Right.
And that's just how she recharges. And so I think that you have to know yourself as you're setting these resolutions and make sure that you're not sort of creating a situation where you're putting yourself in the position to change who you actually fundamentally are, doing something that you're ultimately is going to drain you of energy. I think resolutions should actually push you forward. They shouldn't be holding you
Right.
back and dragging you
Right.
down.
Hey, we're going to take a break right there. And then when we come back,
Just test me. And I think there's something to that in the Christian life, we need to be taking small steps of obedience, even if we don't understand what this is going to do or how God's going to affect it. Like, I think obedience a lot of times doesn't make sense.
For some of us, personal finances aren't just personal. They include loved ones, neighbors, the communities we call home, and the causes we hold in our hearts. At Thrivent, planning your finances is bigger than just money. We help you put your plans into motion and faith into action so you can do more for the ones in your heart. Because sometimes all you need to make a difference is someone to help you make it happen. Thrivent, where money means more. Connect with us at Thrivent.com.
Christians need to stop listening to the world and start listening to God so that thinking Christian becomes as natural as breathing. Welcome to the Thinking Christian podcast. This is Dr. James Spencer. Through calm, thoughtful, theological conversations, Thinking Christian offers a mix of interviews and discussions that highlight the ways God is working in the lives of His people and question the underlying social, cultural, and political assumptions that keep the church from conforming more closely to the image of Christ. Yeah, that would be another thought for people is as you're making these resolutions, trying to figure out what you're doing in your life that's actually hindering you from moving toward a goal that you're setting.
yes.
And at times, deciding whether or not that is going to be a hindrance that you're willing to give up.
Mm-hmm.
I've watched much less TV over the last 6 months, right? Because I've been trying to write a book and I've been trying to get in better shape and, those kind of things. And TV is just one of those things like, I like watching TV, right?
Yeah.
I like my football. I like movies. I like TV show. I like them. But at the end of the day, I had to, sort of gut up and just say, is it worth, which do I want more?
Right.
Right. Do I want to catch up on this TV show, or do I want to work out, or do I want to write this book? Like, what do I care about more?
Right.
And so setting those priorities is, I think, as important as determining the resolution.
Well, and that is kind of a fresh way of looking at things too, because I texted my brother. We're a family of New York Giant fans, and the Giants got off to this horrible start this year, and I just said, hey, this is going to be more time for me to go cross country skiing this year because I don't have to worry about the Giants.
Right.
I'm not going to follow them.
Right. You don't have to watch. You know the outcome. Yeah.
That's right. So sometimes it's designed that way to say, oh, I could give that up.
Right.
Why not give up some misery? I mean,
that's right. Sometimes it's easier choice than others, right?
That's right.
Yeah, I think it's like that. I think we just have to be cognizant of the things that are sort of stealing away our time.
Right.
I do this organizationally a lot, and I think it applies to individuals too. We tend to talk about our lack of resource, lack
Yes.
of time, lack of money, lack of energy, lack of. But what
Right.
we don't usually account for is what we're actually spending that time, money, energy, what have you on.
Hmm. Right.
And so, do you feel better after you've just, I would say I don't feel better after I've laid on the couch for 3 hours watching football.
Right.
Now, I
I
enjoy a
agree.
football
Yeah.
game, right?
Right.
But I don't feel better, right? And so, with the wonders of modern technology, I can have a game on while I'm working out,
Right.
right? That's better. It's better
Yeah.
for me to do that. And so there are ways that you can kind of come around that. But the reality is most of the time when organizations tell me they don't have time, resource, money, whatever,
Hmm.
I usually say, sure you do. You're just spending it in the wrong places.
Right. And also as I go to Denver to work with the team in
Yeah.
Denver once a week. But I have a 3 hour drive there and a
Hmm.
3 hour drive back. And so I mean, again, wonders of technology. Some of these podcasts are just outstanding.
That's
And
right.
you get so much out of that as whether it's a media professional or a business person, uh, or a Christian.
Yeah.
If I'm improving my walk and I'm hearing some good teaching, man, that's really
That's
good. I just put on James Spencer. So it's
well, listen, I mean, it's a really great point. And I think one of the things that I normally raise with people is okay, so you say you want to read more, right? If you
yeah,
limit yourself to reading in paper form,
right.
right?
Yeah.
That implies a lot of other things in your life,
Hmm.
right? It means that you're going to carve out enough time to sit quietly and read a book.
Yeah.
And while I have the privilege, benefit, whatever we want to say, like I get to read books a lot and
Hmm.
I love it. I do make time for it. I'm usually up really early in the morning and down in my office reading,
Right.
and it's great. But the reality is, I know not everybody wants to do that and really has a commitment to do that, especially if you're just starting to read. And so, usually, what I suggest to people is this: do you really want to read, or do you want to be more informed?
Right.
Because those are two separate things,
Right.
right? And so, if you really want to be more informed, now your options open up on the type of media that you could actually listen to.
Absolutely. Right.
You can do an audiobook, you can do a podcast, you can do, documentaries are super cool. Like, and you
Right.
can make room for some of those things depending on what your goal really is.
Hmm.
Now, if your goal is really just, no, I want some quiet time to sit by myself and be with my thoughts, reading can become ancillary to that,
Right.
right? But you could do other things as well. You don't actually have to have a book to sit quietly and get in touch with your thoughts. And so, trying to sharpen your focus on what your resolution is really trying to get you to,
Hmm.
I think is extremely important.
Yeah. I really think that just because of how much I listen to
Hmm.
things, there's been a kind of a disservice a little bit because everything is so YouTube oriented nowadays, that people who drive, there's really we've been talking a little bit more about audio education because I
Yeah.
get I 6 hours in a
Hmm.
car, just things that I'm interested in listening to, has been a really good thing. I'm
Yeah.
an oratory learner. I that's I've always my dad was kind of crippled with arthritis, and when he stopped being able to do things around the house, he used to have to talk me through if we had like an emergency of a
Gotcha.
pilot flame went out or whatever. So
Yeah.
I began to be a really good listener. So
Yeah.
I and being a musician and everything like that, a lot of that is also oratory. I mean, there's some physical things to it, but it's both. It's kind of fine motor skills along with listening. And I think a lot of people are built that way. So if that's one thing I always said. They said, "Well, you're an author," and I said, "Well, I'm more of an audio author. I like public speaking. I like doing those things. I've been in radio and media for a long time, but it is this kind of conversation that it tends to stimulate my brain."
Yeah, and I think at the end of the day, creativity is a great example, right? If your goal, if you're saying to yourself for your New Year's resolution, you want to be more creative, let's say.
Right.
And just like what you said, well, people say you're an author. Well, or I'm more of an audio author. Well, your outlet for creativity is more in the audio setting. It's more in the media setting.
Right.
My daughter loves to paint, right? I was more of a drawer when I was in high school, like pen and ink or pencil. I really enjoy doing that. She doesn't enjoy that.
Right.
But she'll sit and paint just to relax and, do that. And that's great. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that, as we sharpen these ideas of what exactly are we resolved to do,
right,
we start to find our niches. And so we just want to make sure that we're not artificially narrowing what we're trying to do by defining that medium too tightly.
Right.
And, again, to sort of return to the workouts, I'm not built for yoga. I just it's my wife and I have done it a few different times. It's always comical to me. I find the instructors some really funny. But I actually, there's a funny story. So we had a yoga instructor at the old personal training gym that I worked at, and she was going to miss class, and so there's all these people there for yoga, and my boss kind of says, "Hey, James, do you think you could run this yoga class?" And I'm like, I can try. I mean, I'm nowhere near built for yoga, but I can lead people through a stretch session if that's what you want. So, I kind of faked it. There was no deep breathing. There was no, I'm sure it wasn't anywhere near as light and fluffy as they were used to. But the point is, it can be a good way to get in shape. You leave all the spiritual junk at the door, but it can be a good way to get in shape, right? It's just not one that I happen to choose, right? Some people run marathons, some people bike triathlons or whatever they do, right? I'm just a sort of a gym rat. I love lifting weights. And so none of those are better or worse necessarily, but they need to be fitted to who you are. They need to be actually benefiting you. And I think once you find one that you actually enjoy, it's much easier to go, move toward that resolution, right? If I hate being on the treadmill and I say, well, I want to get in better cardiovascular health, and I've got, the choice between a rower and a treadmill. I hate the treadmill. I should not choose the treadmill. It's crazy.
Right.
So we've got to figure out in and of ourselves, what is it that we really love?
Mm-hmm.
And, for you, it might not be sitting down and writing, right? For me, it might be.
Right.
There's no problem with that. Like, we can both exercise creativity in different ways.
Right.
I would just say the other thing that I have found really helps me is, and this is a simple one, just interpersonal accountability. I think particularly if people are trying to kick a bad habit, right?
Yes. Right.
And obviously I'm not thinking in terms of, heavy addiction, like alcohol addiction or drug addiction or something like that. But if they're just trying to kick a bad habit. I've always been a big fan of I'll give the story. When I was trying to lose weight, right, I lost about 50 pounds, 2016. And, my family did it along with me. It's not like they lost 50 pounds too. But the reality was they couldn't keep all the junk food and that, all the stuff that I wasn't supposed to eat in the house and expect that I wasn't going to eat it too.
Right.
And so they were sort of on the journey with me.
Oh, that's nice.
Which was really cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think that sort of community, that interpersonal accountability, that, hey, I'm trying to stop X, right? And then having the people in your life around you say, that's cool. We'll make sure that we're not tempting you to do X, or, we'll stop doing X for a time too. So, if it's smoking, right, you can imagine if you're trying to stop smoking and you live in a house with another smoker, that's going to be challenging.
Yeah.
Right. When I was trying to lose weight and, if there had been Oreos sitting out or something I really enjoyed eating, I don't know. It's not Oreos, but, there are certain meals that it's hard for me to pass up on.
Right.
And if those had been around, regularly, I wouldn't have passed up on them.
Gotcha.
I'm a sucker for a hot pretzel. Like I love hot pretzels. And
I do too. Yeah.
if my son was eating hot pretzels every night and I'm like salivating over them, I'm probably not going to skip them. But he didn't. And so I think that there's a sense in which we need to have sort of a community of people around us to say, look, I'm trying to do this. I could use some help. Is there any way you could help me achieve this resolution? In other words, resolutions aren't just individual things. They're usually a bit communal.
Right. That's good. It is good to have the support, and that's kind of what family's about. It's what community's about, even in that way. And so we try to help each other in a lot of ways, and that's the way it's designed. You're going to be successful, and they're going to be successful in it. It might not be the same way, but it is. That's
right.
I still haven't got over the image of you teaching yoga, but that's.
I don't think anybody has really.
Nose in, breathe in.
Oh man, it was the roughest yoga session anybody's ever had. I knew like 3 moves. I think we did some walking lunges in there. I mean, it was it was the absolute oddest yoga session you'd ever want to be to. So,
but it wasn't videotaped, right? So
I think they ended up giving the session away for free.
Okay.
But at least they got a workout in, and I think that was the whole goal.
Yoga by Dr. James Spencer.
Yeah. I knew we had Pilates in-house too, and I was like, never Pilates. I don't even understand what's happening there.
Yeah, I was just reading something on Joseph Pilati, the Italian guy who came up with Pilates. A very interesting story, and there were some actors that were involved in the very early Pilates, and they actually studied with Joseph Pilati. And I thought, wow, that'd be interesting. So I don't do Pilates. So.
I think, honestly, I think part of the reason that I like weight training, and part of the reason that I wanted to have this conversation about New Year's resolutions,
right?
Weight training always lends itself to progress. Like you either add weight, or you add reps, or you add sets. You add something as you're moving,
right?
And so it's always a progressive movement. There's very seldom a time when you're sitting back and you say, well, I'm just going to maintain at this level, and you never have to progress again. Even maintenance usually requires some level of progression. Right. And I think it's a great analogy then to how people can progress in their daily lives, finding something that they want to get rid of because it's hindering what they're doing, and finding something they want to replace that hindrance with, that they're resolving to do. I think weight training is always a really great example of that, versus something like yoga, which I don't like stretching at all. But it's not as intuitive to me how you see progress in yoga. In other words, I'm sure there is progress in yoga. I'm not saying that, but in the weight room, you put an extra plate on, you do an extra rep, you do an extra set, you do an extra exercise. Like, exactly what you're doing. Yes. Yoga, it feels like, I'm getting more flexible, and I can see how flexible it is, but there's not a real objective measurement there. It's more about feel. And I've always liked that sort of tangibility of the weight room, where you can actually feel things happening. And that's what I'd encourage people to do as they're thinking about their New Year's resolutions. It's a question of setting yourself up for success. And I think, like I said, part of that is making sure you're ready to actually implement the resolution, right? Don't do it on January 1st after you've been up all night. Right. Not a great time for you to have resolve on anything. It's more a good time for you to take a nap. And so unless you're resolving to nap more, January 1st may not be your best day.
I'm going to take more naps this year.
That's right. But do that. Take it in small chunks, like progress small, right? Minimum standards. If you can allocate 15 minutes and you'll always get that 15 minutes in, boom, that's where you start. And you can progress up from there and then get some help, enlist people to come. I've lifted on my own for a lot of years. Now my daughters like to lift weights, and it's super fun to have them in there with me. I mean,
Great. Yeah.
I don't, I'll have them spot me occasionally, but I mean, that's not really what it's about. It's more just about having the camaraderie in the weight room. And, on nights when I don't really feel like doing it, I can say, hey, girls, you want to work out? And they're all up for it. And so we'll go down and work out. And then I'm in the weight room. And what do you do in there? You just lift stuff. And so, it's been helpful to have that little mini home community to go down and get the workouts in. It's definitely held me more accountable. So I think don't be shy about don't be shy about asking for help. Don't be shy about getting other people involved in what you're doing and having them help you implement your resolution.
We'll be right back.
Christians need to stop listening to the world and start listening to God, so that thinking Christian becomes as natural as breathing.
At Thrivent, planning your finances is bigger than money. It's a way to support the people, causes, and community you love, because helping you put your faith into action is at the heart of what we do. Thrivent, where money means more. Connect with us at Thrivent.com.
Christians need to stop listening to the world and start listening to God, so that thinking Christian becomes as natural as breathing. Welcome to the Thinking Christian podcast. This is Dr. James Spencer. Through calm, thoughtful, theological conversations, Thinking Christian offers a mix of interviews and discussions that highlight the ways God is working in the lives of His people and question the underlying social, cultural, and political assumptions that keep the church from conforming more closely to the image of Christ.
I was reading a little bit in one of my other shows about cognitive behavioral therapy.
Sure.
And that is increments. That is building a system, moments, and you do the little steps to do that. You kind of take on a service orientation of what you're doing. It's the same thing with just about anything. If you took cognitive behavioral therapy and you just put flowcharts together or steps on how you're going to do that, maybe that's the way we should be doing resolutions. And I think that gets back to our original conversation here.
Yeah, I think it is. And I think even within our own spiritual lives, and people may seem like this sounds like too behaviorist, right? I don't believe Christianity is about changing just our behavior. It's about a total transformation. But
exactly,
I personally believe that you don't get that transformation until you're actually trying God. So, that Malachi 3:10 verse we've talked about multiple times, where God tells the Israelites, test me, see what happens if you obey me. Just test me.
Yeah.
And I think there's something to that in the Christian life, we need to be taking small steps of obedience, even if we don't understand what this is going to do or how God's going to affect it. Like, I think obedience a lot of times doesn't make sense.
Right.
On the sort of meta level, it always makes sense, right? I mean, God is the sovereign of the universe. He's more relevant than anything we could ever face. And so obeying Him makes perfect sense on that level.
Right.
But in the tedium of our lives, obedience often seems to take us off course, right? And it seems to be like the meandering way around a problem, let's say. But I think we don't really understand and know God as deeply until we start obeying Him. And that requires us just to do something, to really trust God with something, and to test Him in the way that He's calling Malachi, calling people to test Him in Malachi.
Yeah.
It's not about, okay, God, when Satan tempts Jesus to jump off the temple so that the angels will catch him, right? Jesus says, no, you're not to test the Lord your God.
Right.
But I think that the way Jesus lived His life was a constant demonstration that He trusted God.
Right.
And He trusted God by obeying God.
Yep.
And so we need to do that same kind of thing. That to me is the real kicker. And when we think about it from a cognitive behavioral sort of standpoint, that's where we end up needing to be. We need to recognize that some of these small behaviors that we would implement time over time,
yes,
are going to give us a different vision of the way God moves and acts in our lives. And that's really important, I think, for our spiritual growth.
Well, I want to close with one that that the Apostle Paul gave us, and that's that daily activity of renewing the mind. And Romans 12. That's one that I have tried to practice. I wish I did it on a daily basis. But wow, that is test. It tests God on that one, and see what happens. I think that's a good way to take that Malachi verse and bring it into our everyday lives. And that goes back to our prayer, and that goes back to our prayer life anyhow, and all of those things that renewing the mind, and really on the word. So I'm really looking forward to this 30-day in the Gospels, and then going to Acts again. We're taking them in increments. We're not it's not the fire hose.
That's right.
So I thank you for that, James, and this has been a good show. I'm all ready for the new year.
Got your resolutions ready for January 15th, right?
I do, yes.
New Year's ish.
New Year's ish, which I like that. I think we should all celebrate New Year's ish.
Well, very good. And, this has been a great conversation. So appreciate you having it with me. And folks out there listening, thanks for tuning in to Thinking Christian. We'll catch you on the next episode. I want to take just a second to thank the team at Life Audio for their partnership with us on the Thinking Christian podcast. Christians need to stop listening to the world and start listening to God, so that Thinking Christian becomes as natural as breathing.
Life Audio.
Is life feeling chaotic? I get it. I'm Rachel Wojo, host of the Untangling Life podcast. Don't miss the passionate encouragement and faith-based resources you need to help you clear your head and calm your heart. As Shell says, it feels like Rachel always knows what I need to hear. She keeps it real and is so humble. Her podcast is just the cherry on top. Enjoy Untangling Life with Rachel Wojo on lifeaudio.com or your favorite podcast app now.